many of the people from Flight Pattern Kids has moved away just because of our warnings. And I'm really happy to hear that. And I found that out when I'm bringing people together for these court cases, right? That, oh, Pat, I've moved now. Oh, Pat,
Yeah.
I moved. I'm looking for people that were still there and some of moved and this and that. And you know, that made me feel good because, you know, all this work that Mark and I have done, it's paid off already, you know, several times over by these
Well,
people.
here's another frightening story. So I'm out there in the SeaTac area last June, taking these samples and stuff, and so I'm taking this using ghost wipes to wipe the side of the houses. And this woman tells me, "Well, you know, a couple of days ago, it sounded like one of the big, heavy international aircraft was landing in my backyard." So I call up SeaTac, and what it was a Lufthansa German airline flight. They were letting the rookie pilot land, and he almost put the plane down on top of her house. They had to abort the landing, go around and try again. Literally, he was short on his approach into SeaTac. I go, oh my God.
There's,
Not,
there's no
not
I
margin
only
of
don't
error
even know
there.
how that's possible.
You know, it would scare you if you found out how that's possible. You know, there's so many things are possible when you're talking about machines and electronics. I mean, Tim, you and I know better than anybody. You know, when you got software involved in machines, problems happen all the time. Boeing's not doing so well, you know, and Boeing is a big
Yeah.
part of what's happening here. I don't know if you saw the article the other day about the bad titanium and how they're finding holes in it. It's corroding. Well, there you go. That's the
That's
titanium
crazy.
that we're finding in the people, you know.
well, the Boeing spacecraft now that they have now are going to stay up until the 22nd of June because they got helium leaks on the
Oh yeah.
Starliner spacecraft, so they don't
Yeah.
even know whether their engines will fire to deorbit, and so Boeing has some real issues going on.
We're looking at them for our
SpaceX will have to
second
save them.
lawsuit. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, they will. You know what? Elon will. He will come in, and I think that his rockets will be the one, and he'll be taking them up there. NASA had that opportunity, but they went with Boeing, and because you know they have issues. But anyway, you know, Boeing's has some big problems going on right now, and it's not just Boeing; it's Airbus. The quality of their jets has gone downhill. They pushed engineering too far now. Mark and I were talking about this, and we were talking, you know, about the carbon fiber and the metals and these dissimilar products, and that's not bad. I mean, it is bad. You have to watch it. I was in the construction industry, and you know, I know dissimilar products and how you have to watch how you put some of these things together because they just don't go together well. They won't adhere, or you can't bind them or bond them. And as fast
Hmm.
as Boeing has been pushing, you know, their engineering through and cutting corners from what we hear anyway, they've been cutting a lot of safety corners and trying to push this thing through. I don't think that they fully looked at you know what happens, especially this carbon fiber. These carbon fiber on these Airbuses are just falling apart. I think it's a 380 or something like that. The skin's just falling apart. And if you get hit by lightning, it could knock, you know, half of the skin of the aircraft off. You know, underneath the aircraft like that, there's this carbon web of carbon for you know, lightning strikes type of thing to ground it. And that's I've seen the Airbus where they got struck by lightning, it just peeled away that carbon fiber, and there you see the copper right there. You know, and one of the countries, I don't remember who it was rejecting all of their Airbus jets because they're all coming apart, just falling apart. You know,
Well,
and
Air Emirates actually has sent their own inspectors to Boeing because they need those airplanes. And they said, we're going to watch you. The reason that door came off that Alaska Airlines plane, it was never bolted in.
oh, it's never. Oh, geez.
It was never bolted
It's
in.
never bolted in.
There's quality control. See, cutting corners. Somebody wasn't watching. Nobody inspected. You know, you should have inspection for all that stuff. Anything that's critical. You know, you have critical components in that. Typically, you know, I know in other businesses you would have somebody doing the work, and then you have an inspector that comes by, and then you'd have another guy that's independent that's walking around looking at all this stuff. Right? That's the proper way to do things. But I think that they got rid of that one inspector, you know, that's supposed to be walking around looking at everything, and the other guy he was sleeping, or they got to be buddies, and nobody's checking anymore. you can't do that. This is people's life. But one thing, you see is the culture that brought that along is the same culture that lets these airplanes, all the metals come off and land inside the people, and they keep it hush hush. They keep it quiet. They won't let
Well,
anybody
and then
talk
the
about
other
it.
side, in that lawsuit says, well, the government made us do it this way.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, come on, get real here.
yeah. They're
They
trying to
know they
claim.
had a problem, and they even had a fake study done by the University of Washington, and to try to hide this problem. And we were on that like ugly on an ape, weren't we, Pat? We knew what
Oh
they were
yeah,
up to.
yeah. They did a particulate study, right? And they were to go out. The Port of Seattle was funding part of it, and the state of Washington was funding most of it. There was a conspiracy to keep the identification of those particulate matter away from the public. That could not be part of the study. That they could not do any assays for metals. I got a call from. I'm not going to say the name on this podcast, but it was a city council member from SeaTac, and there was a city council member from Burien. And the one from SeaTac was on the commission and was talking about the report. This is the commission for the Move Up study. Okay, so there's all the cities are on it, and I think King County was on it. Washington State, you had a state representative, you had a state senator, you had the state treasurer, you had the Port of Seattle that had their consultant there. So everybody's there in this meeting, and this council member sends me over the report. He calls me. He wants to know, hey, what's going on with this? I don't understand it. Can you read it over and then tell me what's going on? Sure, send it to me. So he sends it over to me, and I read it. And the study really looks good. They're going to go out there. They're going to collect studies. They're going to collect sampling and go in front, behind, and all over the airport. And they're going to see, what's in the air, particulate matter. And I said, hey, the study looks great. The only thing it's lacking is you didn't identify the particulate matter. So, the study's bogus. It means nothing. It's worthless. There's no sense in doing it. You'll be wasting, taxpayers' money. And so I said, get back in there and tell him, hey, got to go, test for metals, and then everything looks good. So he goes back in. He's back in the meeting. I get a call, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes later. Oh my God, Pat, they're all mad at me. They're all upset. No way. They don't want to test for metals. They say it'll cost too much. They say, the world will come to an end. All these things will happen. And I says, wait a minute. No, no, no. You go back in there. It's not going to cost that much. A few $1,000s is all it'll cost. Have them do it. Otherwise, it's worthless. So he goes back in there. He comes back. He's almost crying. I mean, he's upset that these people don't like him anymore. They're shunning him. They're telling him how bad he is. There's no way. Nope, they're not going to do it. No way. And the major player is this consultant from the POS, right? And you have all these people in there. They're all in this meeting. So everybody's aware of what's going on, right? Okay. So anyway, what ends up happening, he come back and he told me, I said, okay, okay, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. I'll go ahead and I'm going to pay for identifying that particulate matter, because what we're going to do is we're going to go out there with the University of Washington, and we're going to test at the same time at the same location. We'll collect samples, and I'll send the samples over to Mark. He can take them into lab, and we'll identify that particulate matter. So I'm not going to mention names again. I called, the people up at the UW that I know, professors, PhDs up there, and I says, hey, we've talked about this before. What in the hell are you guys doing? Not identifying the particulates. And I get this, oh my God, Pat, what are you doing? Stop it. You can't do this, Pat. You're going to disrupt my relationship with my client. I said, who's your client? The Port of Seattle? I says, no, 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 no. You know better than that. You go tell your client, you have to identify that, and we're going to do assays on it. Or tell them to go bye-bye. Oh, no, I can't. It's my client. It's this, it's that. The guy's almost crying, okay? And I'm saying, listen, this isn't going to fly with me. That's not going to fly. I said, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. When you guys go out there, call me. Call me a week ahead of time before you're going to show up on the spot. Tell me exactly where you're going to be and at what time. I will send out a text. We'll be out there. We'll collect samples from the same spot, and then I'll identify the metals. Well, he didn't like it, but I told him, if you don't, then I'm just going to, go tell everybody about this. So you have to do this. Okay, okay, I'll do it, Pat. I'll call you. Do you think he called me? No,
No.
he didn't call me. So I have my people up there in Seattle. So I get a phone call. Pat, UW was out there today. I said, they were. Hold on, let me make a phone call. So I call him up. I said, whoa, what's going on? Do you have amnesia or something? You forget to call me? Oh, Pat, sorry. Oh, yeah, this going on, that going on. I said, okay, when's the next date you're going out testing? We're going out on this date. Okay, we're going to be there with you. What time are you going to be there? This time. Okay, we're going to be there with you. So I call Mark up and I says, Mark, they're going out there tomorrow. It's supposed to rain. I said, this is ridiculous. What in the hell are they doing? You can't be sampling out there in the rain. It's going to lower all the values. I said, so we're going out with them. I know it's not, our standards say we can't do that in the rain, but we're going to do it because they're doing it just so we can show you what's happening. So we went out there with them in the rain and we collected samples. Then we went out there with them when it wasn't raining. And then, of course, we have other samples, from all sorts of times that we've been out there when it was raining. And it was about half as much, in the rainy day as it was on the day it wasn't raining. But bottom line is we were able to identify all the particulate matter, and you see the reports. You've probably seen
Right.
the totals. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
you know where
exactly.
they're at. They're toxic, and they wouldn't tell anybody. So
Yeah.
all of those people conspired, okay, and used state money to conspire to keep that data away from the public. And that's, part
And
of
that
what we're
data has
talking
never
about.
been published in a reputable scientific journal because I sat on the editorial board for inhalation toxicology. You see a paper like that, and they don't identify what the particulates are, it's never going to be accepted for publication.
And they knew that.
Yet it's interesting. Yet it's interesting that Governor Inslee, who seems to be an environmental person in the state of Washington, you think he wouldn't go for that, but apparently,
Well, not true.
I guess his
And
pockets are lined
I'll tell you
too.
who
I don't know.
one of the rats is Karen Kaiser. And I'm just going to come out and say that. That woman is a rat and
Oh.
she is not to be trusted.
Mm-hmm.
She's part of the CACC. She
Mm-hmm.
tried to put a new airport, right? Construct a new international
Mm-hmm.
airport in Graham and didn't tell any of the people about this. It's her and her little clique
Oh, I
that
heard
have
about this.
conspired. And, we're not going to let this go. I mean, this is part of the thing that we're
No.
talking to the lawyers about on the second lawsuit, that these people are going to be held accountable for their negligence. They all had a
Well, it
fiduciary
was a
responsibility.
deliberate conspiracy.
Yes. And they're in our
It was a
group, Tim.
deliberate conspiracy to
They
put out
are.
a
I've heard
false
that name before.
report.
Well, that
Can't do
isn't
that.
even a great area either to begin with because of all the population increase that's going on over there. My daughter lives up in South Hill, and it's interesting that that part of Puyallup is not the same that it was back in the 70s, even when you look at the photographs. I mean, that is a major population area for Pierce County. And why? Just because they have land out there in Eatonville and out in that area,
Yeah,
I
and
guess
it's
they feel it's
beautiful. And,
not a problem to do that.
SeaTac already touches that area. I've been out there.
Yeah.
We did particulate when I
Yeah.
was doing our particulate study. We had devices set up out there in Puyallup and stuff. It flies right over it. Puyallup is a corner for the flights to either
Oh.
coming in from the east or taking off out of the airport and then turning to the east there. And so and then of
Mhm.
course, you have them coming from the south and stuff. So there's already an influence out there. The part that got to us is they wouldn't talk about the environmental end of it. Oh, we'll do that later. Let's just put the airport in and we'll talk about the environmental later. And that's not correct. You need
You
to
gotta be
warn the
kidding me.
people that you have this problem up front. That's what fiduciary responsibility is. Okay. You can't put it in your back
Yeah.
pocket and say it if you want to or say it if you don't. You have to say it. You have to tell them. You don't have
Right.
a choice or you shouldn't be in that
Well,
office,
not
right?
only,
You're
right.
an
Well, not
elected
only
official.
that, the other
Go
thing
ahead.
that concerns me is that there's enough traffic up there in that part of the area to begin with anyway. So by putting another airport in, how are you supposed to mitigate more traffic into that area? I don't think there's enough
Absolutely.
room to do it as it
Absolutely.
is, and we're going to run the same problem with SeaTac that we would have in ground.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about how the additional traffic coming in and out, how that affects it. That's an additional thing that you just brought up, Tim. So add that to it also, right? So you have
Well,
what,
you know,
100,000
Tim, that
cars a day or so coming in doing
that
that at an
SeaTac
airport.
is now all these jet freighters coming in, 747s coming in from
That too,
China
yeah.
and Japan. And so at midnight,
Yeah.
where midnight to 6 a.m., it used to be a dead time. Not anymore, because
Yeah.
that's when they have
That's
these big
crazy.
giant 747s come in.
And they're the worst. You know, the older the aircraft, the worse it is. The newer the aircraft, the better the emissions, this and that. It's less. And you know, especially the ones that are using carbon fiber. So there's not a lot of the aluminum and magnesium coming off that we've seen in the past. But still, it's not good. My next thing is wait till we start checking for these carbon fibers, and they're in everybody. And can you imagine what a carbon fiber would do inside of you when it gets in your bloodstream? Oh my God! Yeah, it's sickening to even think about, and it's happening already. We already see it in the airplanes because they're disintegrating in the air. They're getting sandblasted. So that's going to be the next thing coming up with the carbon fiber.
Exactly. And what I was going to say too is when I went to Anchorage a few years ago to see my dad, he lives in Wasilla, I noticed there were a lot of 747s that are at that airport, but it seems like most of the time, I'm sure they probably have problems with a lot of planes as well, but most of it is probably not a concern to the population because most of the planes seem to take off and land from a waterway.
Yeah.
But
let me tell you a little secret about 747s as counterbalance weights. They use thorium. Thorium.
Ooh.
Thorium.
Wow.
Radioactive thorium. That's Now they say that they took most of it out, maybe kind of sort of. There's no really records of it. It could still be in, but they changed it to either uranium or tungsten. And I don't know if tungsten is a good one to be using as a counterweight either. That has its own problems, you know, and effects with people. You understand that, you know, metals, they decay, right? That's just the natural process of it. So just that decay process alone, we didn't talk about that really. And that decay process is part of the ROS too. But we didn't really talk about the decay because that's another part of the way that these jets come apart. You know, they don't just fall from, you know, the pressure, you know, high pressure, low pressure. It's not just because of sandblasting either. It's also corrosion. And these planes corrode, you know, rapidly. Actually, rapidly, if you look at it. It's a big problem, huge problem.
One of the things too in this area is that we have two companies that do specialty metals, both ATI Chang and another company here in this area. So there's a lot of parts for the planes that are being made here in Albany, in Albany, this part of the Willamette Valley. Is there really concern with a lot of exposure to what they're getting ingested into them as in terms of the manufacturing process?
Well,
certainly,
Tim, if
certainly.
you look at the literature, which, you know, I was this past summer when Pat and I were putting together all this data for the attorneys, I looked at a lot of these studies published, you know, peer-reviewed, published papers from the National Library of Medicine. Anybody can look at that. It's free. You go to www.med.gov, and you're into the National Library of Medicine. 30, 40 million different papers cited there, the abstracts. So I'm going through all this data. Well, where do all these metal studies originate? In the foundries, the aluminum smelting plant, the iron foundry, all this kind of stuff, because these guys are getting a huge exposure because they're around this stuff at least 8 hours a day. Okay. So that's where a lot of these occupational studies, when I started the jet fuel studies in 1990, there were 3 papers on jet fuel exposure, all from Scandinavia. There was not a single paper in the from the United States, any scientist from the United States.
I noticed that.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Understand though,
it really does.
There's something really important in this though. If you understand how this works and you understand how the science is and how these studies get done, is, you know, somebody has to come in and pay for it. It doesn't just happen by itself. It's very expensive to do this, Tim. If you want to replicate what Mark and I've done, you need about $15 million and about 10, 11 years of your life to do this, okay? So it's a great deal of money. If Mark and I wouldn't have stepped up to the plate, it would have never happened, right? If we would have waited for somebody else to come along and pay for this, it never would have happened. So, you know, we put in our time, we put in money, we did what it took to make this thing happen. That's why we were able to do it. You saw what the Port of Seattle, what kind of study they would give you. Yeah, we'll give you a particular study so you think that you're doing it, but it will be inconclusive. See, this is how the system is. So, Mark, I hear it from Mark all the time. He gets people coming to him that need help and this and that, but there's nobody to pay for it. Somebody's got to pay for it because all this stuff is expensive. And the colleges, these universities can't do it for free for everybody. So that was a problem. That's why Flight Pattern Kids, when I set this up, it was going to be free for everybody. It has to be free. And I have to, I have to bite the bullet and pay for it. That's just the way it's going to be. And so, when Mark joined me, he said the same thought. And so we said, okay, let's just do this thing. Let's just do it. And so we were able to do it. Thankfully we were able to do it. And so that's why you never see any studies done, okay? Because somebody has to pay for it. You're seeing ours done because we decided we would pay for it. We couldn't wait for somebody else to pay for it, right? All the politicians, they tried to scam me early on that they would give me money for my DNA study. If I would just get all of Flight Pattern Kids to vote for that move up study, that's what they offered me. And I told them, to go whatever. And I said, that's when I decided, all right, I'm paying for everything. And that's when I said, okay, I'll pay for the whole DNA study. I don't care. And at the time, we're looking at $30,000-$40,000 or something. That was just phase one.
Seen things that happens too, about bringing up the subject about the Port of Seattle. Authority thought it would be okay for 100 years to have the waterfront in Seattle being held together by 2x4s soaked with creosote, and how there was a lot of denial about getting another seawall in there. And I remember all the pushback that was going on when that whole simulation of an earthquake that was going to take out Coleman Dock and all that was a thing.
Business controls them. It isn't the city of Seattle. We're suing the Port of Seattle. We're not suing the city of Seattle. We're suing the port. It's a special, little thing that the legislature gave them to operate and to operate separately. So the city would not be liable for anything the airport does, is basically what it is, right? And so they operate as their own.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But understand that it's run by commissioners. And who gets the commissioners elected but the airlines? I see the same thing at the city of SeaTac now. Everybody, on the council, the mayors, everybody, the airport has them. POS has them. Okay, they got them, in their pockets. That guy that I told you about, for a council member from the city of SeaTac, he knew about all this. He wouldn't go out and tell the public either. And now I see him pushing Alaska Airlines. Go figure, huh? And he lives in the city too. He's being exposed to all this, but he wouldn't say anything either because Alaska Airlines got to him, the Port of Seattle. See, if you want to be in politics around there, there's a clique. And that rat Karen Kaiser I tell you about, she's the leader. Thank God she's getting out of there. Okay. But she's not going to get away scot-free. But anyway, she's leaving. She was not going to be a senator anymore. But that was part of that clique. You remember in high school, hey, I want to be part of the cool kids. That's kind of what it's like there. Except they're not the cool kids. They're the ones. They're the rats, the liars, the snakes, the ones that are trying to fool everybody. And I don't like it. I went to school with a lot of these people, right? I grew up there and I went to school with a lot of people. I know who they are. They know who I am. And
where'd you go to school at in that area?
Mount Rainier and Sunset.
Oh, you
Pacific.
Did too. Okay.
Yeah,
that's what
I grew up all around the airport. Actually, I started like at Riverton Heights, went to Des Moines, and then Normandy Park, and then I moved out to Federal Way, and that's when I decided I got to get the hell out of here. I was very sick, and that's when first time I had to leave Pacific Northwest. Anyway, this has been going on a long time. Understand also that commissioners come and go, right? City council members come and go, right? It's not the city that's bad; it's the ones that are running the city that are bad, right? And it's the ones that have the fiduciary responsibility to all the residents there. They're the ones that are the big problem, okay? And hopefully we can change that. Hopefully.